I huddled in the corner of a dimly lit Soho cafe, camouflaged by a thick wall of ivy. My Arnold Palmer had long since separated into warm, syrupy layers, mirroring the mess of my own life. 10 feet away, at table 4, my husband, Farhan, was laughing, that same golden, disarming laugh that once convinced me to liquidate my 401k and stake my entire career on his failing construction startup. Beside him sat Natasha, the wife of the city's most ruthless venture capitalist. She looked like a predator in designer silk, her hand resting possessively on Farhan's arm. I didn't cry, the tears had dried up weeks ago, replaced by the cold, surgical precision of a seasoned CPA. I had spent a decade auditing balance sheets and exposing corporate fraud, yet I hadn't seen the most obvious discrepancy in my own marriage. A husband who was systematically draining our future to fund a new life with someone else. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over my table. A deep, gravelly voice cut through the ambient jazz. "Have you seen enough?" I looked up. It was Mr. Haider, Natasha's husband. He stood there, as cold and unyielding as a granite monument, holding a thick, crimson-stamped file. "Farhan is spending my money," he stated, his tone as flat as a monthly revenue report. "And he's already paved the way to ruin you." Haider didn't wait for an invitation. He slid into the chair opposite me, his presence commanding the oxygen in the room. He didn't offer comfort, he offered an equation. "You are an audit manager, Sana. You know that when an asset becomes a liability, you don't weep over it, you restructure or liquidate." He pushed the file across the table. It contained a notarized copy of a post-nuptial agreement I had foolishly signed under Farhan's lies, effectively waiving my claims to our marital home and joint savings. "He filed it the day you signed," Haider stated, his eyes as cold as frozen tundra. "Legally, you have nothing. But I have the power to put everything back on the table." His proposal was chillingly clinical, a marriage of convenience. He needed a legal wife with the clearance and professional ruthlessness to conduct an internal audit of his empire, identify the precise moment Natasha began siphoning funds, and stop the bleed. "I don't need faith, Sana. I need an iron fist," he whispered. I looked at the certificate, then at Farhan, who was busy kissing Natasha's hand. In 3 seconds, I traded my broken heart for a weapon. "Done," I replied. The next morning, I walked into the glass-walled headquarters of Sterling Holdings, not as a desperate wife, but as the newly appointed chief financial officer. My transformation was absolute. The soft, insecure woman Farhan had discarded was buried under a sharp, charcoal-grey power suit and an air of untouchable authority. Haider didn't trust me, and he made that clear, but he trusted my hatred, and more importantly, he trusted my competence. I bypassed the standard orientation and went straight to the 28th floor, the nerve center of the company's accounting department. The room fell silent as I entered. I sat in the mahogany-clad office Natasha had once used as her personal piggy bank. My fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing the ERP system. It was a chaotic web of deception. Hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into dummy accounts, disguised as consulting fees, and logistics solutions. I didn't need a supercomputer to find the rot. I used basic cross-referencing and trial balance verification. The numbers screamed fraud. I had the smoking gun. Every illegal wire transfer, every offshore shell company, I mapped them all out, preparing to sever every artery of their operation with surgical precision. The silence was my most lethal instrument. Ever since I took the CFO position, Farhan's frantic calls flooded my phone. He was losing his mind, his construction firm was collapsing, and Natasha was panicking as I systematically froze every suspicious account linked to their shell companies. I let the phone vibrate against the mahogany desk, watching the screen light up with his desperate, panicked texts. "Sana, pick up. What have you done to the accounts? We can talk." I didn't answer. Instead, I sent a formal notice to the bank, triggering a compliance hold on every transaction they had attempted in the last quarter. I wasn't just managing finance. I was conducting a masterclass in psychological disintegration. By simply remaining professional and unreachable, I turned his own greed into a noose. Every time he tried to reach out, he was met with nothing but the chilling, immovable silence of a woman who had finally calculated the cost of her own survival. The boardroom meeting at Sterling Holdings was the final act of their downfall. Farhan and Natasha stormed in, fueled by a mixture of arrogance and desperation, intending to demand the release of their frozen funds. They didn't see me until they reached the head of the table. I sat there, draped in shadows, with a red file lying open before me. "You're finished, Sana," Natasha hissed, her voice trembling. "Release the holds, or we'll ruin you." I didn't blink. I simply gestured toward the large wall-mounted screen. With a single click, I projected the financial flow chart I had meticulously constructed. "This isn't just about money, Farhan," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "It's a criminal evidence map." I displayed every falsified invoice, the dummy INs of their shell companies, and the wire transfers linking them directly to tax evasion. The room went deathly silent. Farhan's face turned the color of ash as the federal officers, who had been waiting in the adjacent office, stepped in. Their smug expressions shattered, replaced by the hollow realization that they had been outplayed by the very person they had once called naive. The dust finally settled, leaving behind a stark, quiet reality. Farhan and Natasha were stripped of everything: assets, status, and the freedom to weave their next lie. In the aftermath, Haider and I stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the city lights shimmering below like the very data points that had served as my weapons. The marriage of convenience had served its purpose, yet the partnership had evolved into something far more formidable. I wasn't the same woman who had huddled in that cafe. I was now the architect of my own reconstruction. Haider looked at me, not with the cold calculation of a business rival, but with the genuine respect one warrior holds for another. "You were right," he murmured. "Numbers don't lie, but they do reveal the truth." I took a final look at the skyline. I had reclaimed my life, not through grand gestures of forgiveness, but through the relentless, unforgiving precision of the audit. The betrayal that had once threatened to break me had instead forged a sharper version of myself. I was no longer an investment. I was the investor, holding the equity of my own existence.